Good morning, everybody. I am JD Hoovener, and welcome to the Bold Today show. This is our weekly broadcast across Facebook, LinkedIn, and on YouTube. So we welcome all of those viewers, entrepreneurs, inventors, people interested in business law. I'm excited to bring on hopefully two special guests. I've got one backstage already, Rodger Kohn with Symbios Law, based in Seattle, and so he's going to be on just a little bit talking about startups, talking about how do you involve intellectual property into a business. If you've already got a current business up and running and you want to know how do I get this moving, how do I monetize, all that good stuff. So that's coming up on the agenda. We'll spend the bulk of our session today on that. And again, we have another special guest that could join too, another business attorney from the East Coast as well. So I do have a batch of avo.com questions. If we, for some reason, run out of things to talk about, which I highly doubt, I've got a nice backlog of those. So if you're tuning in from Avo, hang in there. We'll get to you at the end. And before I go, I do want to put up our disclaimers here. I'm an attorney. Others that are on the panel, may be attorneys as well. But this is not the time to bring up a confidential question. Know that this is a public forum here, so there's no expectation of confidentiality. Okay, and there's no attorney-client privilege either. All right, so there's my legal notice. It's up there for all you guys to see on the chat. We will be prioritizing live questions. I love live questions. Doesn't matter how silly you think the question is, bring it on. We want to be able to take it on, and we'll move to that question as soon as we can. I'll be looking for that as we chat. If you're watching this after we broadcasted and you want to catch us next time, I'm here every Wednesday, 9 a.m. Pacific and noon on the East Coast. So you can catch us the next week and ask your question. And what I'll do is I'll also provide a way to get a hold of me personally via email or text message. So I'll put that in the stream right now. You can catch me at jd@boldip.com, and there's the text only number. And I'll get back to you usually same day, same business day. So we'll do that. Cool. All right. Well, we're off to a good start. I'm going to bring on Rodger, and we'll get started from there. Rodger.
Good morning, JD. Good morning. How are you?
Doing good. Thank you. Very good. I feel like I was telling my people on the phone this week. This feels like the first real week of the year. It's always kind of a rough start. But I don't know about you, but it sort of feels like things are finally rolling for 2022.
Yeah, it's being here in the Pacific Northwest. It's been very Pacific Northwest. Lots of snow and lots of rain. So yeah, I agree with you.
Totally cool. Well, yeah, we got a ton of snow on the mountains. I'm over here in Moses Lake, which is the center of the state now. And so we hear about, the passes being closed. I was like, wow, that seems wild. So yeah, a lot of snow up here for sure. But things are finally kind of settling back weather-wise. So I wanted to have you on, Rodger. It's a real privilege to have you. Thank you for your time as a business attorney that has been doing startup business consulting for years. It's a real treasure. So any of our live viewers that maybe run current businesses or hoping to be a business owner, you've got a rare opportunity to ask an expert in business law. What's on his mind, or whatever you're up to, what questions you have. So I wanted to tee things off with you, kind of thinking of my clients in mind, that have begun the process. They're inventors first, and they're concerned about protecting their invention. And so they hired a good firm like Bold Patents, and they got their patent secured. Perhaps they've even gone as far as to lock in a trademark. But now they want to get serious. They actually want to enter the stream of commerce. What are some of the top things that come to mind, given that kind of background for them to be thinking about?
Well, I think there are two things that I like to, or maybe three that I like to tell all new entrepreneurs. One, what works for your friend's business or whoever's business, your neighbor, whatever, doesn't necessarily work for you. It depends on what your goals are and how you're going through your business and going to approach your business. So what may work great for one entity or one business person doesn't necessarily work for you. And so figuring out what the right fit is for what your goals are. And that sort of gets you to, starting with the end in mind. What's your goal? Are you building something that you want to have investors and you want to sell that, you want to take it public? Or is this something that you're going to bootstrap and you want to do for the next 20, 30 years of your life? Those are two different sets of goals and two different business entities that you might be looking at from a starting point. Number two, I think, is build a good team around you. By having already engaged Bold Patents to do something, you're starting that process. Then you're reaching out to a lawyer that's a good fit to help you with the business structuring. But a good accounting, knowing how your business is going to run, a good business accountant, tax accountant is an important part of that team. And then thinking about the other people that you want on your team of advisors, somebody that understands the financials of running a business, because you're going to be focused on running your business. You can't do all those other parts yourself. And I personally like working with people who have that good team in place because it makes us better at what we do. We're better able to see around the curves, see around the corners, and give the advice that you need. And then those are the two big pieces of advice. The other one, which is I always tell every class, every group that I talk to, is I have one golden rule for business law, which is if it's not written, it doesn't exist. So
I love it. Okay.
I spend a lot of time trying to reconstruct history with people when they get into a little bit, things get a little, and that goes between business partners. It goes as between, people you're doing business with. So that's just something to bear in mind in the background.
Those are three. I wrote all three of those down. I love how you said that. I'm going to probably kind of pick on these. So, I love the goal thing. I think a lot of entrepreneurs, as they get started, even me, you kind of see somebody, you hear of some business, you read a book, you want to just, I can do that, right? That's for me. I love how you said that, even though that may be the catalyst, starting with the idea that, they did it, but that doesn't mean that's right for you, right? That doesn't mean that that's going to fit with who you are, which personality is, and where your goals are. So it's the first time I've heard it said just like that. I really appreciate that. That's true goal identification at the onset. It's not just about make as much money as quick as you can and then you figure it out. It's probably a much better way to have it all planned out, to know once you get there, once you reach certain points, that it's actually going to match with what you want. So that's really neat. And then the team concept, I hear you grow your team. I think, I got to hire people. I got to bring on employees or contractors, but you actually meant advisors, right? Building up a board of advisors, and that is your team. You mentioned tax lawyers. I can't forget lawyers. What other type of advisors are sort of key, to startups?
Well, I think somebody, building a board is one thing, and then building your team of advisors is another. And it may be that you engage different lawyers to do different things. For example, you and I do very, very different things, and having both your IP lawyer on board and somebody that may be a general practice business lawyer. And, this is, again, where you're starting to think about what are you doing and how are you going? What's your goal? Is your goal to go raise venture capital money? Well, that's a whole set of people that you need to be able to look at, because you're going to need somebody that can really build your financial statements, because your investors are going to want to see how that financial statement and those pro formas work. I don't specifically do I don't do venture capital work. I work with privately held and sort of self-funded firms. And I do work with companies that have venture backing. I just don't do the corporate finance part. So if you're looking to raise funds through, venture capital and maybe going public, you want to be looking at, who's going to be on my team for that piece of the equation, both from a legal standpoint and from an advisory standpoint. Having people who've been there and done it, or have been there to provide their advice, is really important. The accountants, I think, are key. I think it's, that's the part that drives a lot of what you're doing, is both, making the money, but also how are you set up for, paying, paying taxes and making sure that the money that comes in the door actually can get out to those people who want to make the money on it in the most efficient way. And that
Yep.
again depends on how you're structured. If you're a privately held company, you might be a pass through. If you're a venture backed, you'll be a C corp, and there'll be different nuances to that. So having somebody who knows what that's going on, because that's the person who I want to talk to and say, hey, what's our goal here? How are we trying to do this? And that helps drive how we structure things and how we build the documents and build your company to work for what you want and what your goals are.
Yeah, so that's perfect. Yeah, I mean, so it's important. You're saying to, before you go make heaps of money, actually be thinking about, planning for the structure type that's going to help you be most effective.
Yeah, sorry, I'm
No problem at all.
We're there. Yeah.
All right.
Busy law office. That's good, right?
Exactly, right? Yeah, it's live. Well, cool. Well, yeah, I mean, something else you mentioned is, raising venture capital. Maybe some of those people out there have heard that term, but don't really know what it means. Can you lay some of that out? What does that mean to go raise venture capital?
Well, venture capital are people who are investing in businesses. They're usually, they're either wealthy individuals or groups that have put together funds. And there's sort of two layers to this. There's sort of angel invest. Well, yeah, when you start off, it's friends and family, right? Oh, I'm going to have my buddy invest and do this. And then maybe you'll take the next step and they'll be what are called angels, which are usually individuals who are making bets on companies. And then you look at these venture funds that are actually big groups, big funds that are putting in. That's where you're putting in lots and lots, much more significant dollars. All of those have different places. Those are all securities offerings. That's a whole area of law that I think that Vivek, the other person who you talked about having on, I think he does a lot more with that. All of those folks are going to be looking for some sort of ownership stake in your company. And, people talk about how expensive is that money. It's how much are you going to have to give, how much of the control and ownership of your company are you giving up? Are you selling to each of these layers of investors? How are you dealing with them coming in? And where people can often get a little tripped up is in that first part where you're just getting started and you're going to your friends and family. And those are the people who, you want to make sure that, because those are actually securities offerings, and those can create some challenges for you later down the line when you're trying to bring in the next levels of investors. And so you want to make sure, even when you're starting to do that, that you're consulting counsel and understand what your plan is. And I wanted to circle back on something about the plan, and we were talking about there, and you also have to, you have your plan, you have an idea of where you want to go and what your end is, but that path is never a straight line. I mean, JD, you and I both know this with our own businesses. It takes twists and turns, and it's never a straight line. I always say it's kind of, a meandering path.
Yeah,
and
for sure.
So you have to start with the end in mind. You have to also be understanding of that you're going to have to pivot at times. Things happen, like a global pandemic happens. You're going to have to be able to pivot in those situations or adjust. And so at least my goal when I'm trying to help an entrepreneur start out is understanding what that end goal is, where we are right now, and creating a structure that helps get to those, bridge those points, but has the flexibility to adjust and the flexibility to say, okay, we're going to, this didn't work, we're going to retrench and do this. And so that's an eye to what we're always doing. And so I want to let folks know that, being able to adjust and making an adjustment is always that's part of the process. And
yeah. Yeah, you don't expect perfection. You're not going to be able to stick with, very, very rarely, I should say, probably, you're going to be picking one plan and sticking with it, for 20, 30 years.
right.
Things definitely ebb and flow.
Yeah.
And one of those points, kind of back to what you're saying about, thinking about structure, even when you start taking money from friends, right? When you're just starting out, putting money together. We see this, and I'm actually now thinking about this as you're saying it. I should perhaps be introducing you to our clients that, for example, they're short on money. And so what we end up doing is, they want to move forward with this, the first start on their patent filing. We do research, and we'll get, it's their business partner, their friend that's actually paying for it. And so we have to set all the right waivers up in terms of, engaging with the client. But at that point, in essence, they have become a partner, an investor of sorts, and maybe they should get that in writing, as you say, right? Nothing counts.
Exactly.
Even at that early stage. And I actually just thought of that. And usually I'll wait until they get patent pending or something, and I'll make the intro. But yeah, that's pretty cool. It really does start early, in terms of how they're documented, and making sure that everybody's on the same page.
And it's, it doesn't have to be, I mean, I also sort of analogize myself to the guy on the Allstate commercials that's always falling off the truck or doing whatever. I only see stuff when it goes. A lot of times mayhem. I see the stuff that goes wrong. Mayhem. I've seen that go. If you see the corpus juris behind me is actually Mayhem to Moneyland. It's my favorite volume. It's from way back, but mayhem is, you have to expect that too, I guess. But I like to get that stuff in writing up front, even if it's not super formal, because people's expectations start to diverge, or what you remember and what somebody else remembered. And one of the big pitfalls for young businesses is when the initial partners, or when somebody came in and said, well, I thought I was a 50% partner because I paid for all this. And now you're caught up in this drama and perhaps this lawsuit or litigation, and that completely hamstrings your ability to do anything else with your business. Go raise money, advance the business in any way, and it takes your focus away from it. So doing that, and it seems expensive at the time, right? It seems expensive to hire a patent lawyer to do this. It seems expensive to do these things. But what I try and say to people is, this is an investment in your business. It's an investment in growing the foundation of your business, and you have to look at it that way. It's not an expense. It's just part of the investment in building the structure that you need to really grow.
So cool, Rodger. Awesome. What I want to do is, I just have Vivek pop in, but I want to, if you're open to it, is it okay if I give out your email address? If anybody has any questions
fine.
for you.
Yeah.
Okay. And so, big thank you to Rodger, Kohn. Am I saying Symbios, right?
Symbios, yeah.
Symbios.
Working together.
Yes, perfect. And so I'll copy that here, put that in the notes to contact Rodger. And we're not going to have you go away, but I just want to make sure we get the plug here. If somebody wants to follow up, there it is. That. Absolutely. So let's bring on Vivek. I see him backstage. Vivek, are you there? Can you hear us?
I am here. Yeah, how you doing?
All right. Good. Sorry for the confusion. I must not have sent that link out, or who knows what, but you made it.
I made it. My videos give me some problems, but are we just on audio? Is that good? Or you want me to
got you on audio? No, okay. This is perfect. If you figure out the video, we'd love to see it, but if you can't, audio is good. It's coming through loud and clear.
Cool.
So what we have covered a lot. I mean, Rodger kind of laid it all out, but one thing we weren't able to try to get into was this idea of raising money and getting toward, I think the word was secured, or security, right? When you're actually going for venture capital. So I want to get to that. And so to set the stage for you a little bit, my initial kickoff was, I've got clients that they start out and they secure IP, right? They have the patent, and maybe they've got a trademark as well, but they're pre-revenue. They want to start a company and raise capital. Talk to me about raising money and things to think about, just in general, for some of these first timers.
Yeah, sure. Well, thanks for having me here today, JD. So yeah, a big part of our practice is really helping startups scale, and I think at the center of that, at the heart of that, is usually some discussion about financing. So, in our practice, and I think a lot of folks who are sort of working in the innovation technology space will primarily look to raise money in, I guess, what I would call like sort of the Silicon Valley model, sort of this high growth model, and which is more often than not sort of the venture capital route rather than like a private equity path. But in our experience, look, most startups, I guess you could say, usually raise like one round of like, you can call it really anything, but most people call it something like a seed financing or something like that. And most seed financing is, usually from friends, family, maybe some angel investors and things like that. But the thing to really bear in mind is early on, most companies, whether they hold IP or not, right? But whether they're looking to raise money, they are hesitant to put a valuation on their business, right? Because at the very beginning, it may just be an idea, a few people, maybe a provisional patent, maybe some trademarks, just the very basic things. And so it's very extraordinarily difficult, right, to value businesses at such an early stage. Moreover, if you try to put a value on your business early on, you might be sort of creating a problem for yourself, because let's say you value your business at, $5 million, and then a year later you try to go raise and you say your business is worth, $15 million, right? Every investor in that round is going to say, okay, what have you done in the last year to increase the value by $10 million, right? That's right. That's one problem. And I think the overall problem is early on trying to pin or trying to articulate really a reliable, defensible valuation on a company early stage is difficult. So typically what these companies will do is raise on, in the olden days, right? Like more than 5 years ago, they would use like what's known as a convertible note. More recently, over the last 5 years, Y Combinator in I think about 2016 developed the SAFE, which is an acronym for a simple agreement for future equity. And both of these instruments, the old school convertible note or the SAFE, are both contracts essentially giving the investor a right to convert to equity upon a future equity financing. So I can unpack that for a second, but this is important because it's really the way that candidly most of these kinds of businesses are funded initially. So when you take in money on a SAFE, all you're doing is, let's say you get I'm the founder and I get a SAFE from an investor for $100,000. What is happening there is it's a contract where I am telling the investor, okay, I'm taking your $100,000, right? And in exchange, I'm not giving you any shares of my company. But what I'm giving you is a contractual right to receive equity in the future when I actually do sell equity in the company. And you might say, wait, this just doesn't make sense. What is this like promise to promise to promise kind of thing, right?
Right.
Well, really what it's saying is, listen, none of us have any real way of articulating a defensible value of the company today. So what we're going to do is I'm going to take your $100,000 and we're going to start building this company. We're going to hire people. We're going to refine the technology, and we're going to try to get to a point where we're generating some revenue, right? At that point, I'm going to go out to the market and look for some real institutional investors, right? Maybe a really big VC, like, in people like Sequoia or Andreessen or Benchmark or people like that, or, the thousands of smaller venture capital funds that are out there all over the United States, right? Well, the idea is when you get mature enough to sort of attract that institutional investment, those investors, and hopefully you internally as a company, will have more data and will be able to, at that point, put out there a value to the company on an enterprise basis that you're happy with, right? And so when that investor comes in and says, okay, now, we're at the Series A round or whatever you want to call it, right? The next round, and we're going to actually sell shares of the company, right? So let's say we're going to sell shares and raise, $10 million on a $100 million valuation, right? What you're basically saying then is at that round, you're going to sell 10% of the company and at that value of $100 million. So what happens when that transaction closes for the $10 million investment at a $100 million valuation, all the folks who signed SAFEs before that convert to shares in the company at that same time based on a $100 million valuation. Okay. So basically, that's how, an early stage company typically takes in money and, in that sort of first couple of years. Does that make sense?
That was amazing. I almost.
Okay.
For me, so what on that safe that I buy, I'm the investor, what percentage of equity, how much equity of that 100 million do I get?
Right. So if the value is $100 million and of the company, and you're converting to equity at that point, and you have $100,000 into the company, right?
Yep.
You're basically getting, 1%,
whatever the math,
or whatever, 1% of 1%, right? It would be what that is. But you might say to yourself, JD, boy, why then am I going to take that early risk? Why don't I just wait till these investors come in and then I'll just hop in? Because otherwise it seems like I'm getting involved really early in folks who don't really have a mature idea. And the answer to that is, when you get involved with a safe, usually that investor will negotiate a number of preferred terms, or just, a bunch of investor rights that sort of make the early investment a little more attractive, such as they may say, okay, whenever we convert to equity, we're going to do that, but we're going to convert at a 20% discount, right? So instead of converting at $100 million valuation, we get to convert at an $80 million valuation. And, nobody's going to balk at that, because they're going to say, well, you know what? We should give that early stage investor that 20% discount because they took a chance on this business when nobody else would. Right. And then there's some other, kinds of things you can get to, like special rights, things like pro rata rights, things that give you the right to invest in every future round, things like that. And so that's generally how the early stage game works.
Vivek, that was a really great explanation. And
thank you. Nice to meet you, Rodger.
Nice to meet you too. I had deferred to you earlier on some of this because I'm not a corporate finance lawyer.
Yeah.
I just know enough to play one on TV.
Yeah.
I think a concept that's really important, especially for early stage people who are just starting out, is this idea of friends and family and accredited investors. And what can happen if, you've got sort of a layer of, hey, Uncle Bob has given me, $5,000, and my buddy Joe has given me $5,000.
Right.
How to deal with that, and how to work with that in the context of knowing that you want to take the path that you just outlined.
Yeah, that's a great question. So, Rodger, I think what you've kind of outlined is a situation where, if you're a founder, and let's just say you've cobbled, your friends all want to give you, like $5,000-$10,000, and let's say, it comes in all different shapes and sizes, but it all happens early. What we'll typically have clients do is, at the very beginning, we'll draft a safe, right? And we'll just say, look, let's just have all of your friends and family, whether it's $1,000, $2,000, $5,000, $100,000, let's have everybody just sign and invest on safes, right? And the one thing I left out in the prior explanation is, a safe converts to equity in the company when an equity financing occurs. That's a capital E, capital F. Sometimes it's called a qualified financing. An equity financing or qualified financing is usually defined as a round of financing in which the company sells shares, in a priced round, and there's usually a threshold of like $1 million or more. So what you do as a founder is you cobble together your friends, your family, you get those smaller checks, and you issue those safes to everybody. So now everybody's holding a safe, and they've all given you, $5,000, $10,000, and you can keep doing that. And you get to a point where then maybe you've hired people, or you've advanced enough to the point where you want to go raise a bigger round. Then you go to the institutional investor, and maybe they give you, anything more than $1 million. All those folks would convert to equity on the closing of that transaction. Does that make sense?
So cool.
Yeah.
Rodger?
Yeah, I think the question that, I guess the follow-up question I have there is related to, I guess the securities question about, and I haven't worked with safes very much. So securities questions around, are the people who, often these friends and family investors are not what we call accredited investors in the business. Accredited investors are people who have a certain level of wealth. I think it's $1 million net value exclusive, not including the equity in their primary residence, or a certain income level, so that they're people who have the ability to absorb a loss, and have perhaps a little bit more sophistication. And so when you're bringing in friends and family, I think the concern is always that those folks may not be accredited investors. And so often when you're doing these rounds, you want to make sure that you're fitting into your exemptions from securities, exemptions. And we're both using a lot of jargon here, and I wanted to just kind of break that down. How do you handle that issue of friends and family not being necessarily qualified as accredited investors?
Yeah. So great question. And Rodger's 100% correct. You need to really keep your eye on that, because that's a very big regulatory issue. So the easiest answer, which may not be the one everyone wants to hear, is, try to stick to the accredited investors, because that's, just from a compliance standpoint, that's going to be a lot easier. You can take on, you can give equity and, to unaccredited folks a lot easier if they're providing services to the company, or there are some other narrow exceptions if you've got a pre-existing, longstanding, relationship with someone, blah, 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 blah. But basically, I'll put it this way. You need to either just be focusing on sort of high net worth individuals, the people who are, accredited, or if you're not, and you're really dealing with friends and family who you are, pretty sure or have a concern that they may not be accredited, talk to a securities lawyer, because you could still raise the money. But I have found in my practice, unless you're raising a lot of it or really have a strategic interest in getting that investor through the door, there's enough compliance where you might just think twice about it.
Okay, guys, we're just scratching the surface, and we're over by a couple minutes. Unfortunately, we're gonna have to have you guys back on.
Sure.
My head's spinning. I've mentioned this to Rodger before you came on, Vivek, but it happens often where we'll have an inventor bring in their business partner, their financier, to drop $5,000-$10,000 on getting a patent, and we should be having that conversation. So I'm learning through this convo a lot. Again, sorry for missing sending you that link, Vivek. We'll get you next time.
Yeah,
it's been a pleasure having you on, as well as Rodger. Vivek, is it okay if I share your email with the audience here?
Yeah.
Okay, good deal. And can you give us the website they can find you on?
Sure. We're at jayaramlaw.com. That's JAYARAM as in Mary, LAW.com.
Okay. And they can get that from the email as well.
Yep.
All right.
Nice to meet you, Rodger.
Nice to meet you, Vivek. Sounds like we might need to talk some more just to keep our clients in line.
Yeah. Maybe JD can connect us.
Absolutely. We'll do. Thank you, guys. Have a good rest of your day. Take care.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.